Eddie the Eagle Edwards från Storbritannien.
Michael Eddie the Eagle Edwards shot to international stardom when he competed in the 1988 Calgary Winter Olympics as Great Britain's first ever representative in the ski jump. His passion and spirit perfectly encapsulated the Olympic dream, and he is still often cited as the personification of determination and grit. In the late 1990s, Eddie returned to education, studying GCSEs and A levels with the National Extension College, before going on to gain a degree in law. Eddie still has a passion for education, and kindly agreed to speak to NEC about his life, career, and lifelong learning. Start the conversation with you just sort of giving us a little bit of an overview of your educational background. You know, how did you find school? I think is probably a better way of putting that question.
That is a much better way.
Yeah.
My education started like everybody else when I was about 5 and went to infant school and junior school and senior school, and I loved school. I was always excited to go to school. I loved all the lessons. I was never a disruptive child. I always liked to concentrate, although my concentration could sort of wander sometimes. But I absolutely loved school, junior and senior. Of course, my favourite lesson was PE because I loved sport, and I played football for the school and athletics, and I did volleyball and gymnastics and all that kind of thing. But I wasn't so much into the academic side. I did enjoy the academic. I did enjoy history and geography and maths and general science, things like that. But I wouldn't say I was overly keen on the academic side. I was more, I wanted to get outside in the playground and play sport and go down to the playing field and play football rather than the academic side.
We'll touch on it, but you studied with NEC later on and you went on to do a degree in law. I mean, did you find that sort of later on in your sort of teens or in your when you were an adult that, you know, there was a more of a sort of a passion for that sort of academia sort of side of learning?
I think so. And I think one of the reasons I wasn't so much into academic was when the academic side was because when I became 13 years old and I was invited to go on a school ski trip. That was it. I loved skiing, and the better I got at skiing, I started racing, got the local championships and then the regional championships, and then I got invited to join the England team, and then progressing towards the British team and racing internationally. Of course, all my effort and all my thought was into my skiing and my sport. And I felt that I could have done a lot better academically. It's just that my interests at that time were elsewhere. But I always thought that I might be able to go back to education at a later point. And it's been amazing over the last 40 years how flexible education has become. And now anybody can start and stop education at any time. They can rejoin education and learn new things. And then it's so flexible. You can do it part-time, full-time. You can go to university. You can do open university. You can do distance learning, all sorts of things. And when I retired from ski jumping in '98, I was made bankrupt quite a few years ago, and it was very interesting how my lawyer and my barrister put my case together. So when I went back into education, I thought, well, it's been ages since I was in education, so I did distance learning, and I did I think it was 3 or 4 GCSEs, and it was I loved it. I did it at home. I was sent the pack and the coursework and stuff, and did all that. And then I did an A level, and then I decided to go to university full time because I thought law was a very difficult subject anyway, and to try and do it on your own at home was going to be difficult. So I decided I would go to university full time, and I loved it. I loved studying law, and I still like reading my law books today.
So just to clarify, the GCSEs and A levels you did was with NEC around sort of 98, 99. And the motivation there was sort of just to an understanding of what was going on in your personal and professional life. I guess that sort of grew out into a real sort of passion for education and law.
It was, yes, it was, and all the money that I was earning from Calgary was going into a trust fund, and the trust fund was dealt with very badly, and it caused me to go bankrupt. But the case they put together for me was amazing, and I love the analytical side of law, because when I'm skiing and doing my sport, I used to have videotapes taken of me ski jumping, and then I would analyze it frame by frame, what I'm doing and what a world champion is doing, what the difference is, and then I would try and work. So I was much more into that analytical side, and of course law is very analytical, so that suited my kind of way of thinking, so that helped. And I still want to do more learning. I think you're never too old to start learning.
That's it. When we had a pre-discussion away from this, you did, mention that you like to pick up your law books in the evening sometimes, which I think is great.
Yeah, I do. I'd much rather read a book where I'm learning something from, whether a law or psychology, how people tick, how their minds work, things like that. I'd rather do that than read a Harry Potter, read a novel. I'd rather watch a film. But if I can read a book that I can learn from, I just love it. Absolutely love it.
I think we'll just go back a little bit, because you sort of mentioned about the circumstances caused you to sort of go bankrupt, and you had to sort of reassess what was going on. Need sort of no introduction to so many people that are going to be watching this video, but you were a bit of a phenomenon, I would say. I mean, it was kind of, I've been looking at some of the old YouTube videos and stuff today and over the week since we last spoke, and you really got to get a sense of the scale of sort of how sort of big you were at the time after the '88 Olympics. I mean, you went to America. You're on the Johnny Carson show. I mean,
that's right. Yes, with Burt Reynolds.
Good. Would you do something like that? You're an athlete. You played football. Would you get up on top of a 70-meter ski jump and do that?
Are you out of your mind?
Yes, I think so.
But yeah, it was a dream of mine to get to the Olympic Games, and I finally did it by doing ski jumping. And although I wanted to carry on for sort of 4 or 5 subsequent Olympics, they didn't like what happened, because I got christened Eddie the Eagle at Calgary, and it just exploded around the world, and everybody was captivated by this Eddie the Eagle. And my feet didn't touch the ground for about 3 years.
And we begin now with a brief lesson in history. Can you name 3 sensations we've imported from Great Britain? John, Paul, George, and Ringo.
I don't know what Beatles means.
Just means us. There was Twiggy, who proved that Thin was in, and Chuck and Di. Where would People magazine be without them? And now you can add one more to your list. He's Eddie the Eagle Edwards.
I was traveling all over the world, opening shopping centres and golf courses and fun rides, having a whale of a time. But what I really wanted to do was carry on ski jumping. But because I became so popular, to the fact that I got more attention than the guy who won the gold medal, they didn't like it. So they imposed all these new rules and regulations, which effectively kicked me out of the sport. So I just threw myself into being Eddie the Eagle. And then eventually they made the film about my life about 5 or 6 years ago. And they did such a great job with that, because they really captured the heart and spirit and essence of my story. And the fact that for me, just getting to those Olympic Games was my gold medal. I came from a country with no snow, no training facilities, no trainer, no money, no equipment, nothing. And yet I still managed to get to the Olympic Games, and the resilience and the tenacity and that never giving up spirit, that determination really came through in the film. So I really, really loved it. And it still makes me cry to this day.
I heard you were a champion, so I was thinking maybe you could give me a few tips.
Give up? There's one for free. Watch this guy, number 2 in the world. And he knew what he was doing.
Well, that's it. I think you get that from just speaking to you anyway, but also, I think that's obviously why you became so popular. It is that tenacity and determination that you describe. It is very much a shame that, they did change the rules. Therefore, because I think that's really sort of that's the for me anyway, and I think a lot of people, it's more about getting to somewhere, and that was your dream, to become an Olympian. And it took you, I read that you were sleeping in your car, and
I slept in the car, I slept in barns, I slept in cow sheds, I scraped food out of bins, and I was sleeping in a psychiatric hospital in Finland because it was a cheap place to stay. Just before Calgary and things, but I was prepared to do anything so long as I could carry on ski jumping, because I just loved my sport. I loved skiing and loved ski jumping so much, and I was prepared to do anything so long as I could carry on. If that meant sleeping in a psychiatric hospital, sleeping in a cell, then I would do so. And so yeah, it was, and that, I think that determination, my mum and dad would call it stubbornness, and that tenacity, that resilience came, I think, from middle child syndrome. I'm a middle child, and to fight tooth and nail for any kind of attention. But it gave me tremendous resilience. And, once I put my mind to doing something, I would go for it. And that was the same with my law. Once I decided I was going to study law, I just got into it and read all the books, and I loved it. And so, yeah, I can be like that. Once I set my mind on something, I go off, and no matter how many people say no, it can't be done, I want to prove to them that it can be done, and I've always been like that, and I think I always will be, really.
No, I think it's a very, I think you're a very inspirational figure. In my mind, I can see that there's a comparison with some of our students who come back and they retrain, and then they go into university, and then they do their passion. And I think nothing will sort of deter them or stop them. You're also a sort of great representation of our NEC alumni in terms of that you did return to education as well.
Absolutely. And yeah, and I was very lucky that I found my passion when I was 13 with skiing. Other people may not find their passion, or are too nervous to actually go for their passion and go with it. But eventually they do, and there's still lots of avenues to sort of explore that passion and go with it. Like going back into education and studying, and it can lead to a whole new path for the future. So I would always encourage everybody. My two girls, I would encourage them, whatever they want to do. There's always a way to do it, and there's always a way to learn. And that's what I like about education now, because it is so flexible, and it can fit whatever lifestyle you have now. You can always make time and study. And so I encourage lots of people to never stop learning.
Was one of the main factors for choosing sort of NEC distance learning, was it the flexibility? I mean, what were you doing? Were you training at the time, were you? Or
I just retired from ski jumping, competitive ski jumping. So I came back to the UK, went back to Cheltenham, where my family were from and where I was born and raised. And I went back to live with my mum and dad. And then I was just trying to decide, what do I do? Because all I've ever thought about for the last 30, 40 years was skiing and ski jumping. And I decided, well, whatever I do, I really need to sort of learn, even just basic computer skills, because I didn't even know how to turn a computer on. I needed to get back into, or just my regular things like the maths and the biology and the the sciences and all that kind of thing. So I thought, well, I'll go back and do my GCSEs again, that I loved doing when I was a teenager, and it was a nice sort of easy way back into education, and I really enjoyed it. I filled in, of course, back then I had to write my coursework and send it off, and then they would send me then the results. But of course now you can use it all online. It's done all online. And I loved it, and I was reading through all the coursework, and I could do it whenever I wanted to do it. So I was still going off running and doing all my training and going to the gym, but I would set aside a few hours in the morning and a few hours afternoon or in the evening, to do my work, and I love that flexibility. I could do it when I've got an hour to spare. I'll read a book, and if I was doing a job, I would take the books with me and read while I was, if I got there an hour early. So I always found time, and I think anybody can really find time if they want to do it, and I really wanted to do it.
I mean, do you find that that's a sort of reoccurring thing in sport and with sports professionals? There's a point where their career ends for whatever reason, and then sometimes left feeling like they don't have support. Or is that something that you've sort of found with people that you've connected to or spoken to?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of sports people, especially when they're really elite athletes, and they've trained from about 5 years old, and now they're sort of 30 or even earlier, depending on the sport, 25 to 35 years. All they've ever thought about is their sport and competing, and then it comes to an end, and then they're lost. They think, what do I do? Where do I go? All I've ever thought about is and it's only a very it's only a very small, very small percentage of athletes who then go on to either become trainers or pundits on television
Yes.
and things like that. And they do get literally lost, and a lot of them turn to drink and all sorts of things. But you can use the skills that you've had in your sport, that you've learned from your sport, find something else. And also, what else are you interested in? I always encourage all the athletes, to keep those interests, even when you're doing a sport, because you need to do something afterwards. I was very lucky. I just went straight from ski jumping, did my studying into law, and I loved it. But then I obviously carried on doing any legal work in the meantime. But I did prepare. When I went to university, I prepared. So I saved up enough money so that I didn't have to work for 3 years while I did my degree. As it happened, I carried on working anyway, and I didn't lose any income. And I never missed a lecture. I never missed a tutorial or a seminar. And I just loved every day of being at uni and learning from these professors and things. And the more I digged into law, the more I loved it, and it was great. And it was just a shame that when I finished my law degree, going on to the next course, because back then you had to do your legal practice course to become a lawyer, or your bar exams to become a barrister, and they were £20,000, no guarantee of a job at the end of it. So then I went back to my old job as being a plasterer. So, but I did love my law, and I still love reading my law books, even though I do a little bit of plastering still now.
You're from a long line of plasterers, is that right? Yeah.
Yes, my brother, my dad, my granddad, all my uncles, they were all plasterers. So I grew up, on the building site, really. But I've always regarded it as a plan B. I thought there was more to life than working on a construction site. But I always thought that it gave me that safety blanket, because I could always rely on that to fall back on. And then it gave me the confidence to go out and explore and do all these things. But if it failed, I always had my plastering, I always had my construction behind me that I could fall back on if it all went pear shaped.
It's interesting how you sort of decided. I mean, did you feel like, in terms of your motivations as well, other than your circumstances for choosing distance education, was it partly sort of dipping your toe back into education, before you sort of went back to that face-to-face learning?
Yes, very much so. It was, if I wanted to go to do my degree, I thought it would be too big a step to go from having not done any education for 20 odd years to all of a sudden doing a degree. I thought that might be just too big a step. So I thought, dip my toe in. But I thought just doing one GCSE through distance learning, I thought, well, I've probably got time to do at least 3 or 4 GCSEs. So I just thought I'll just throw myself in and do 3 or 4 different subjects, and then I can just sort of flip from one subject to another. It was very much just dipping my toe in, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the work. I enjoyed reading it and doing all the work, and doing the coursework and sending it off and hoping that I'd get a good grade and things like that. And so it was very much dipping my toe in. And talking about over the last couple of years with COVID, I think it's accelerated the use of computers. Nobody really knew about Zoom 2 years ago. Now everybody uses Zoom, and I think that's really nice.
Obviously, we still have the course materials are sort of written purposely for self-study, and you can sort of do that. But now we've also sort of put in interactive elements onto our learning platform. So it's, videos and audio and things like that. Stuff that can be very helpful, as well as, tutor-led and, fellow student forums and, webinars and things like that can be really sort of useful for a student to sort of just really sort of jump in, and sort of be completely immersed in it. I did just want to just sort of pick up on something, because obviously, you're not somebody that I would associate with trepidation in terms of, somebody who's sort of, would do that. I mean, there's many people that would know, wouldn't even go up that high, let alone sort of do the jump. But it's interesting still that you felt like perhaps after your career that going into education is still a little bit of I'm going to have a think about this, and it's I still do feel like I need to sort of get sort of comfortable, and that's coming from you. So I can imagine there's sort of plenty of people out there that perhaps worried about going into education later on in life, or it might be their first experience of education, but they're stepping outside of, you know, the mainstream, that's say, you know, face-to-face learning.
Yeah.
I mean, would you have any sort of words of advice for anybody that might be considering, you know, going back into education or choosing distance learning or online learning?
Absolutely. Yeah, because a lot of people think that because I was able to go off a 90 and 120 meter ski jump, that I'm fearless, but I'm the most risk averse person out there. I never do things recklessly without thinking. I think very carefully what I'm doing before I do it, because I didn't want to kill myself. I didn't want to hurt myself. So, you know, I had to be very careful. And I was always scared when I did my ski jumping, always. But it's important to be scared because it makes you focus. It makes you concentrate, because you know that if you make a mistake, the consequences could be horrendous. So, yeah, even though I was able to go off a 120 meter ski jump and jump 120 meters through the air, going back into education still, you know, gave me that fear. But I used it in a positive way. I used it to make me focus and concentrate. And the more I looked at what courses were available and how they worked, I then, you know, became more comfortable, and I was less fearful. So I would encourage anybody, whatever their lifestyle, whatever their living habits are, you know, whatever life they lead, if you want to do something, and if you want to learn something, if you want to change your course, change your path, it's easier than you think, and you just got to take that first step and have a look, research it, and there's plenty of things out there you can read, and just go for it. Yeah, you'll be surprised just how easy it is, and the more you do it, the more confidence you get, and you're on your way. And it's I would always encourage anybody to do it.
No, that's perfect.
It's always on your mind that your next jump could be your last. The fear is always there. You can't get rid of it. It turns into a sort of a respect for the hill.
You know, a piece here is, and this might seem a bit trivial, but I was listening to you've had a bit of a pop career, and I listened to one of your songs earlier.
Yes.
And was it Fly, Eddie Fly? I just wondered, just for my own curiosity, I just wanted to see sort of learn a little bit about that, and just sort of see how that sort of came about. And you know, it's actually I enjoyed it. I did enjoy it.
Yeah, well, I used to sing at school. I was in the school choir, so I did do a little bit of singing at school. But then when I came back from Calgary, the manager that I took on to sort of look after and organise events that people wanted me to go to, he was in the music business. So he organised a song to be written, and I sang a song called Fly Eddie Fly, and I think it reached number 50 or 51 in the charts back in 1988. But then a few years later, I sang a song in Finland in Finnish. A guy called Irving Goodman wrote a song about me because I became Eddie the Eagle at the Calgary Olympics, and one of the newspapers said, why don't you get Eddie over to sing the song together as a duet? And he loved the idea. And the very day that I flew to Tampere in Finland to sing the song with him, he died of a heart attack. And I thought, well, that's it. I'm just going to turn around and go home. But the recording studio asked me to go in and sing the song and they released it as a tribute to this Irving Goodman, and it reached number 2 in the charts. So in Finland, I'm a pop star, and it just goes to show that you know, I didn't really, I was not a singer. You know, I've never been, I've never wanted really to be a singer. I thought, well, it's just somebody wants me to do it, I'll go and do it, and have a go, see what happens. And I had the whale of a time. I traveled around Finland for 6 months, singing in pubs and clubs and music festivals. I sung in Finnish, so I wrote the lyrics down phonetically, and I sang the song. And people in Finland can understand what I'm singing, but nobody gave me the translation, so I have no idea what I'm singing.
Still no idea what you're
I know it's about me, but I don't know what is written about me. So it was very, very strange. But it's just one of those things, you know, the opportunities come your way, and you've just got to be ready for those opportunities and just go with them and see where they land and see what happens. And I had a whale of a time. It was great fun.
Fly, Eddie, fly, fly, Eddie, fly. Eagle won't be landed at the next.
Well, it just leaves me then just to thank you so much, again, you're an incredibly inspirational figure. I think you'll be an inspiration to all of our students and anybody, hopefully, that's watching this and sort of, wants to, follow their passion. And also, as you say, sort of just taking opportunities. I think that's a really important sort of lesson. And, sometimes as well, I mean, the opportunity arises. It might be the only time that you feel like this can happen, and you may as well sort of go for it. And I think it's incredibly inspirational. Thank you so much.
Yes, no problem. And everybody out there, dip your toe, and I'm sure you'll love every bit of it. It's always good to learn.